Shalom Mashpaka. So I have some amazing news. It's a testimony. And that testimony is that my vehicle is officially paid off. Now, with that being said, the praise is not necessarily that the vehicle is paid off. It is that Yahuah is faithful to do exactly what it is that he said he would do. So back in 2024, I had lost my job, and I wound up getting a job at the hospital, the local hospital here, in medical records as a temp. And I was doing so well that the CFO wanted me to stay. My office was right outside of the department head for medical records, and he was good friends with her, so he used to come in and out of her office all the time, talking to her. They would go to lunch, this, that, and the other. And she and some of the other people in the department was telling them how well of a job I was doing. So he actually asked me to stay, but he asked me to stay as a temp, at temp pay. So I would still be working through the temp agency instead of a full-time employee. And it was a very stressful job. So I asked Yahuah if he wanted me to stay. Now, if they had said $21, I probably would, because that's that's what the pay was. I probably would have just stayed, which I'm kind of glad that's not what they were offering, because that would have been disobedient, because I needed to ask Yahuah. But I asked Yahuah if he wanted me to stay there, because you never know, that might be where he wanted me for the time being. And he actually said no. That's when he gave me the instructions that, first he told me that everything I would have in this next portion of my walk with him, everything I had would be something like I couldn't get it on my own. So he was telling me that I was not going to have the ability to get these things on my own. And then he told me that he was going to put it on the heart of those that he wanted to sow into me. And I remember one of my other videos, I mentioned that my mother was one of them. My mother is a Christian. One of the people is a Muslim, and then another person is an awakened Israelite, right? So with that being said, it was people from different walks of life. Those are the three main people. There were other people along the way that did sow into me for a time, but these people were the consistent people for the past 2 years now, because it's been 2 years. And I have had to live off of what they have sown into me. And mind you, the other thing that Yahuah told me was that I could not ask for anything. I had to, if I needed something, I had to go to him about it, of course, or I just had to trust that he was going to take care of it. But of course I went to him, was like, hey, I got this going on, and handed it over to him. But basically, if he didn't provide it for me, I was not going to have it. And so I have had to walk like that. I've had to go without things that I wanted, but never without things that I needed. So me saying that my car is paid off is just the testimony that when he says that he'll supply all of our need according to his riches and glory, he definitely will do that. And again, it just so happens that I'm talking about something material. A car is a luxury, so it's not something that is necessary for me to live. I need shelter, I need food, I need clothes. I don't need a car. So again, I don't want anybody to get caught up on what it is that he did, what it is, the fact that my car is paid off, but just the fact that Yahuah is faithful in the things that he tells us. And again, this is such a great testimony, in my opinion, because I had people telling me that I was going to not have a whole bunch of things and struggle, and it would be hard for me during this time, because they were talking about how the economy was about to crash, and if you didn't have bug out bags and all this other stuff, then you would be struggling, right? So that's why this testimony is such a necessary testimony, in my opinion, to be telling, because Yahuah told me what he would do for me, and he did just that. And with that being said, I remember I mentioned in another video on how a lot of us liken Yahushua's return to the first Exodus. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was actually go to Exodus 12. But I want you guys to go and read the entire chapter. I'm just going to read like a verse or two. But Exodus 12 is where I'm getting this from, how we're not supposed to take anything. So Exodus 12:39 says, and they baked matzah cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Mitzrayim, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Mitzrayim, and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victuals. Now, the thing with that word victuals is, I actually went and looked up what that word means first in Merriam-Webster, and it means food usable by people, supplies of food or provisions, and then and that is as a noun, if I'm not mistaken. And as a verb, it means to supply with food, to lay up provisions, to eat, right? So they didn't have any of those things for themselves. So again, the bug out bags, the storing up food, that was all things that a lot of people were talking about. You got to make sure you have plenty of water and MREs and all this other stuff. And Yahuah told me, he said, don't be like them. He said, I will provide you with everything it is that you need. And then again, going back to Exodus 12:39, it says that they had not prepared for themselves any provisions, any food supplies, right? And then it makes me think of Luke 12, starting in verse 16, which says, and he spoke a parable unto them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentiful. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? And he said, this will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But Yahuah said unto him, you fool, this night your soul shall be required of you. Then whose shall those things be which you have provided? So is he that lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward Yahuah. And remember, Yahushua talks about in Matthew chapter 6 how we're supposed to lay up our treasure in heaven where rust and moth don't destroy, versus laying up our treasure on earth where rust and moth do destroy. And that's Matthew 6, starting in verse 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth where moth and rust do corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust do corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. It's that thing with thieves breaking through and stealing, that's looting. So think about it. If the world goes completely kaput and there was no more accessible food, but then you had all this food stored up, you're a target. People are coming to get what you've got. That is the nature of the carnal nature of man, is I want what you have. And the thing about it is, mankind does not say, oh, we can share it. Mankind says, you got it, and now I have to get rid of you so I can have it. Because sharing requires you getting a portion of whatever it is that you have. But if they take you out of the picture, they can have their portion and your portion. So at the end of the day, Yahuah is talking about stuff in a way. As a matter of fact, he's talking about it through his word, because Yahushua is the one that said this. But he's talking about it in a way that we understand. Looting, we know that looting happens. The tiniest bit of friction and people are looting, right? Home invasions and all this other stuff. So Yahuah is like, don't do none of that. And again, going back to Exodus 12:39, they didn't take any food supplies for themselves. They didn't have food stored up for themselves. And when they were in the wilderness, we know that they ate manna. And when they complained about the manna, Yahuah gave them quail until it was coming out of their noses, right? He was like, oh, so you want something else? But we know that manna was bread from the Shamayam, from heaven, which Yahushua identifies himself as the true bread from heaven, or the true lacham from heaven. So they were receiving Yahuah's word. The manna represented Yahuah's word being given to them every day. And remember, Yahushua said in Matthew 6, give us this day our daily bread. That was the manna, right? For 5 days, they were supposed to only eat the bread that was given to them. And then on the 6th day, they were supposed to gather twice as much, because the next day was the Shabbat, right? So they weren't supposed to do any type of work on the 7th day. So give us this day our daily bread. This is what Yahushua is talking about when he is saying this. But again, he is the daily bread. He is also the word of Yahuah. So give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily word, instruction, guidance, right? So that is what we're supposed to be seeking every day. What do you want me to do, Yahuah? That is what he is saying. But again, I had to give that testimony about the car or the vehicle, because again, it's not that Yahuah paid off my vehicle. It's the fact that he did what he said he would do. So praise Yahuah. And he did it when I didn't have a job, a true job. I mean, I do clean a hospice office every first day, every Yom Ahad. But the money that I make from that pays for my car insurance. And please believe I'm grateful for that, but I don't have anything left over after I get that money for anything else. So all the food that I've been eating, all the car repairs that I've been doing, like all of this stuff, and even the vehicle being paid off, this is completely Yahuah. I cannot say I did anything to make this happen. This is all Yahuah. And the reason why I get on here and say these things is because I made a vow to Yahuah that I will look like a fool for him. Now, hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I am a fool. I'm saying that if I look like a fool to other people on behalf of Yahuah, then I'll do that, because I also know that he knows I'm not a fool, because I'm doing what he told me to do. So to him, I'm not a fool, but to the world, I might look like a fool. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Leviticus 7 talks about the peace offering. Well, starting in verse 11, but I'm going to start in verse 15 actually, because there's something that I want you to see. It says, "And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day that it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning time." So it's a peace offering of thanksgiving. What this looks like in the spiritual is you receive the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, because Yahushua is the peace offering. Romans 5:1. Go read it. I'll probably put it on the screen. Yahushua is the peace offering, right? So when we receive the testimony of Yahushua, we give thanks to Yahuwah. And for a lot of us, that was an automatic thing. It was nothing that had to be coerced out of us, right? We automatically gave him praise because now we are awakening to the truth. So we have all, for the most part. Now, if you're somebody that didn't do this, I listen. You're probably not even listening to this, but I'm confident that most of the people listening to this that have received the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach have given thanks to Yahuwah for Yahushua, right? So this has been offered. But let's continue. "But if the sacrifice of his offering be a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the morrow also the remainder of it shall be eaten. But the remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burnt with fire. And if any of the flesh of his sacrifice of his peace offerings be eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offers it. It shall be an abomination, and the soul that eats of it shall bear his iniquity." And I want to continue. "And the flesh that touches any unclean thing shall not be eaten. It shall be burnt with fire. And as for the flesh, all that be clean shall eat thereof. But the soul that eats of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings that pertain unto Yahuwah, having his uncleanness upon him, even that soul shall be cut off from his people." So that's basically a great example of that is Yehuda Iscariot. He is the one that he had his uncleanness upon him, and he ate of the peace offering. Because remember, Yahushua is the peace offering. Yahushua is the word of Yahuwah. So he received the testimony of Yahushua, and he still had his uncleanness upon him. That's what Yahushua was talking about in Yehukanan, John chapter 13. So it's starting in verse 10. It says, Yahushua said to him, Yahushua's having a conversation with Kappa, with Peter. Yahushua said unto him, "He that is washed need not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And you are clean, but not all." For he knew who should betray him. Therefore he said, "You are not all clean." So Yahushua already declared that Yehuda Iscariot was not clean. He still had his uncleanness upon him, just like what it's saying in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 20. "But the soul that eats of the flesh of the sacrifice of peace offerings that pertain unto Yahuwah, having his uncleanness upon him, even that soul shall be cut off from his people." And if you go over to Acts 1, You can read about Acts chapter 1. You'll read about what actually happened to Yahudah Iscariot, right? Killed himself in the field, right? So with that being said, he is cut off from his people. There's no repentance in death, right? So he can no longer repent for the things that he did. That is what it looks like to have your uncleanness upon you, but you be eating of the peace the peace offering. And going back to the vow, so notice that it says that you have 2 days to eat it, or the third day, if you eat, it's an abomination. And notice that it also says that you're eating the flesh, okay? I just want to point that out. Let me go back. Verse 15, and the flesh, that word is bashar. When you go to Ephesians, where it talks about the armor of Yahuah, and it talks about in a lot of English translations, it says gospel of peace, right? But if you actually go and track that word back into the Hebrew, it's bashar, the same word as flesh, the flesh of peace, right? The flesh of shalom. And we're talking about the flesh of the peace offering right here, right? And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered, and he shall not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering be a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day that he offers his sacrifice, and on the morrow, so the next day. Also the remainder of it shall be eaten. But the remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burnt with fire. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings be eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offers it. It shall be it shall be an abomination, and the soul that eats of it shall bear his iniquity. So it's talking about not being slack in carrying out your vows unto Yahuah. That's very important. If you go over to Deuteronomy 23, starting at verse 21, it says, when you shall vow a vow unto Yahuah Eluah, you shall not slack to pay it. So again, you got 2 days to eat it, third day is an abomination. For Yahuah Eluah will surely require it of you, and it would be sin in you. So, let me finish. Let me go down to verse 23. But if you shall forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in you. That which is gone out of your lips you shall guard and perform, even a free will offering, according as you have vowed unto Yahuah Eluah, which you have promised with your mouth, right? So, going back to what I said to Yahuah, I'm willing to look like a fool for him if it's for his will to be done, if I'm saying and doing the things that he wants me to say and do, which means that for a time, it's going to look like what he told me was wrong, or that I'm not really hearing from him. Because think about Daniel. Daniel gave a lot of prophecies that we're just now seeing, right? I'm pretty sure that there was people, it might not have been written in the book of Daniel, but the people that were around him during that time still existed and still had lives and personalities and so on and so forth. We just were told the important things for us to know for our salvation. But with that being said, because we know the nature of mankind, even within Israel, we know that there was people that was talking trash about him. That was like, oh, look at him over there dreaming, interpreting dreams, and got all this stuff going on, this, that, and the other. And we know that to be a fact because look what happened with Joseph, with his own brothers was talking trash about him. So we know that it happens in and outside of Israel. Folks be putting their mouths on people, right? And it took a while for Joseph's dreams to come into fruition. It took a while for that to happen. So for the longest time, he looked like a fool. David was anointed as a king, and then he had to flee into the wilderness because the person that was sitting in the place of the king was trying to kill him. And it took him a while before he actually sat as king of Israel, in the position of the king, in the place of the king. You know what I'm saying? It took a while for that. So you're going to look like a fool when you're doing and saying the things that Yahuah tells you to do and say until it comes into fruition. Now I have a testimony that I can give to people. But just going back to the vow offering, if you say you're going to do something for Yahuah, you cannot be slack to do it. If you repent, there's repentance. Don't be prideful and be like, well, he'll get over it. Or don't self-condemn and think, oh, what you've done has been so egregious that you can't come back to him, because both of those are tools of the enemy. Pride and self-condemnation are both tools of the enemy to get you to pull yourself away from Yahuah. But who can separate us from the love of Yahuah, right? Who can separate us from Yahuah? Nothing, right? Nothing can pluck us out of his hand. But I want to venture back to Ephesians, where it talks about the Bashar of peace, because again, it's very important that we know these things, because the Ruach HaKodesh will reveal these things unto you. And we know that the traditions of men and the doctrines of devils have tried to conceal them from us. So it says gospel of peace in almost everybody's translations. And if you have the Sefer, it says Basora of peace, but the word is Bashar. Bashar of Shalom, the flesh of peace. And again, if you go back to Romans 5:1, it says, therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace, we have Shalom with Yahuah through our Adonai Yahushua HaMashiach. So if we have peace with Yahuah through his son Yahusha, that makes Yahusha the peace offering. Otherwise, we would have no peace. By whom also we have access by faith into his grace, wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of Yahuah. Yahusha is the peace offering, and you're supposed to eat the flesh of the peace offering. So in Ephesians, when Shaul or Paul is talking about the Bashar of Shalom, having prepared your feet with the Bashar of Shalom, he's talking about having prepared your feet with the testimony of Yahusha, the testimony of the flesh of peace. And the reason why that's important is because if you venture on over to Yehukanan, John chapter 6, and let's go ahead and start in verse 48, right? It says, I am the laham, the bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. Remember, we talked about that. This is the laham which comes down from Hashamayam, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the high laham, the living bread, which came down from Shamayam. If any man eats of this laham, he shall live forever. And the laham that I will give is my bashar, my flesh. The bread that I will give is my flesh. Okay? That is the bread, the flesh of the peace offering that we're supposed to eat. And then again, it's important to know who Yahusha truly is, because you know that he's not just the son of Yahuah. You know that he's not just a sacrificial lamb. We know that he's not just the kinsman redeemer. He's not just the truth, the life, and the way. He is also the word of Yahuah. So if we're supposed to eat the flesh of Yahusha, that means we are supposed to eat the word of Yahuah. Man should not live by bread alone, by lacham alone, but by every word, dabar, that proceeds forth out of the mouth of Yahuah, man shall live. That's Deuteronomy 8:3, and Yahusha repeats it in Matthew 4:4. It's very important. So this testimony that I'm giving, I'm not giving it to say, ooh, look at me, look what I got going on. Because listen, Yahuah could take this car any day. The testimony is that he's not a man that he should lie. And he did it without me being able to do it on my own. And now he's still teaching me to do things. Like when he's telling me to do certain things, he's starting to strengthen me up to believe that I can do all things through Hamashiach, who strengthens me, right? Because I used to doubt that, because in the world, I would try to start businesses or do this and the other, and I would always fail consistently and horribly. So he had to build me up in that, knowing that if he's sending me out to do something, it will get done regardless of my own efforts, as long as I am obedient to his instructions, right? Because it's not me doing it, it's him doing it through me. So that is, I know I mentioned that in another video. That is where he has me right now. So he's building my faith in that area. But just by him telling me, like, it's very hard. It's not hard for us to do what Yahuah says. It's just that our flesh doesn't want to die. And we don't want to relinquish control. Our flesh wants to be in control. So, and also we live in a fallen world. So the world would deem me as a bum. I'm about to be 43. I have a 10-year-old son. I live in my dad's house. However, culturally, in Israel, an unmarried woman lived in her father's house. Now, it's true that she was also a virgin and didn't have a child. I can't take that back. I woke up after Yahuah woke me up after I had my son. So I can't change that. Okay. However, I am living as an unmarried woman in my father's house. And I do help my father with certain things that he has going on, especially technologically, because he is an older adult, right? So with that being said, according to Yahuah, I'm exactly where I need to be. But the world says I'm a bum. Oh, you over there living in your daddy's house. You should have your own place. You should have this, that, and yeah. That's what the world says. It's not what Yahuah said. And it's a humbling thing because I do see other people in Yasharal and even outside of Yasharal that have all those things. And I'm not going to lie and say that my flesh doesn't go, wish I could have that. But what would it profit me to have all that stuff, but then at the end of my life burn in the lake of fire? And I have to give a disclaimer here. I'm not saying those that have those things in Yasharal will burn in the lake of fire. I'm just saying for me, that is not what Yahuah has me to have. So if you have those things, but you're being obedient to Yahuah, the lake of fire is not your destiny. That is not what I was saying. I just had to add that in. You feel me? So Ruach HaKodesh has to quickly come and remind me that although I might not have those things, what I do have is a relationship with Yahuah, which supersedes any of the material things that we can have. So this testimony and the things that I come in here and say is not to brag on me, it's to brag on Yahuah. And the fact that if he did it for me, he can also do it to any of you listening who is obedient. And if he's telling you something that goes against what you're hearing from all these voices in Yasharal right now that are speaking, then understand, if you know that you have taken the time to sit and really try to hear, listen to, and obey Yahuah's voice, and it doesn't contradict his word, then do what he said and don't listen to the other voices. The other voices are there to get you to be disobedient, to get you to doubt. Do what Yahuah said. Because for a time, you might look like a complete and utter fool. But there will be a time when you don't. And that's when that testimony comes. And that's when you're able to give Yahuah glory through the testimony, because you allowed yourself to be made small so that Yahuah could be shown as big as he is. Matter of fact, it's not even showing his true his true glory. This is just a snippet. This is just a small portion of. Matter of fact, this isn't even anything big. It's just, this ain't nothing to Yahuah. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about a being that created everything that you see. When you open your eyes and you look around, everything you see, Yahuah created that by speaking. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, this is just a small little piece of what he's capable of doing. But again, I'm not special enough to where I'm the only one having it done. Not to mention, we can read about it, these types of things being done to our ancestors in this history book that we call the Bible. But it's important that we give our testimonies when he does it to us now, so we know that he's still doing these things to those that are obedient. He's still doing these things. And if he's taking care of me when the economy is trash and the world is going kaputs, then wouldn't he do the same thing for anybody else that's being obedient to him? Again, I'm not that special. I'm just obedient, and that's all because of his Ruach. Without his Ruach, I wouldn't be able to give this testimony, because I wouldn't be obedient. You know what I'm saying? And I will tell you this. I'm going to say this and I'm going to get off. After the last video that I made, and I was, transparent and all this other stuff, I felt so light. It was like a weight had been on my shoulders and I didn't realize, and I felt so light. But what I failed to do was remember that anytime You are given a testimony. And I remember I mentioned in that video, I said, be free, live as, stop just saying that you're free and actually live free. Anytime you tell somebody to go against what the enemy wants you to do, there's going to be an attack. And I was so elated by how Yahuah has been moving and teaching and growing me and healing me that I forgot to look out for the attack. And so I've had to repent. Like, I had an attack happen. I failed the test, right? And then I had to repent after that video, in between these two videos. And that was my bad. But glory to Yahuah, because he keeps showing me that he keeps showing me how amazing he is. I'm not going to stop telling y'all how amazing he is. And I'm sure y'all know how amazing he is, but I'm not going to stop giving him glory, honor, and praise, because he's worthy of it. He's worthy of way more than what I'm giving him. But what I'm giving him, y'all going to hear about it. All right. So yeah, the vow offering, if you make this vow unto Yahuah, make sure that you are dedicated to carry it through. Any vow unto Yahuah. And Yahushua even talks about it. He talks about, a man that puts his hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom. Yahushua talks about counting the cost of following him. And that goes back to Deuteronomy 23, where it talks about that if you forbear to vow to Yahuah, then it's not counted as sin to you. That is how you count the cost. You got to really think about because when I said I'll be willing to look like a fool, I understood that meant that there would be times where people didn't understand, or where it didn't look like what I said Yahuah said was going to happen. But every single time Yahuah has justified me in those areas. And y'all listen, count the cost. Understand that being a son or daughter of Yahuah and following his word, that's Yahushua, means that to the world and to the false brethren, you're going to look like a complete and utter fool. But you have to be okay with that. Because you got to ask yourself, does what people think about me outweigh what Yahuah said? Or does what Yahuah said outweigh what people think about me? And I'll let you guys think on that. All right. Shalom Mashpaka.